The real estate industry is full of bad actors, empty promises, salesmen's tactics, and pressure. We wanted to change things, and that's why we started Stoic Realty. This is a podcast that will help you understand how we think about things and the philosophy that we use to run our business.
If something about our story resonates with you, whether you're a seller, a buyer, or just someone looking to get into industry, please feel free to connect with us.
So there's been a lot of changes in the real estate industry in terms of like PR. It's definitely getting better. But when we started as agents, it wasn't glamorous. It was a kind of hobbyist, not really a career, nothing really anyone took seriously. And people still have got bad ideas about agents. So I thought it's fun for us to chat about what kind of things, like Tendor phrased the question, what kind of things make us roll our eyes when we hear agents or people in the industry talking. I'm sure you've got one off the top of your head.
I've got many. And you never want to be seen as that person. And being in the industry, I think you feel people immediately associate you with that bad agent that they once dealt with.
There's like that stereotype of the used car salesman, right? Who's like super pushy and is like uses all of these cliches to sell, thinks he's super clever using these like psychological tricks, creating FOMO, creating fear of missing out. Like, this house is going to sell quick. I've got 3 other people coming to see it this afternoon. If you don't put in an offer now, you're going to lose it. Yeah. And then the buyer doesn't even have time to think about if they want the house. They're just too concerned with the fact that, if I don't sign today, I'm going to lose it. And then people end up, rushed into things, not looking at other options. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's one thing that we try and do, where we'll say, look, let's show you as many options as we can. Keep it relaxed. Don't rush into anything. If we do find something that's a good deal, we'll tell you about it. But I think a lot of people feel hard done by when they have those salesman's tricks and tactics used on them.
You feel like you've been forced into buying that property. Where for us, I know both of us, there's so many times during that whole deal where we tell people, go home, think about it. Like
sleep on it.
If you come tomorrow morning and you say, this is probably the worst decision I've made, it's fine, tell us. Yeah. But it's never, we want people feeling like they've made that decision by themselves. We've just given them the information to make that decision. But it's always better, even you, when you buy something yourself, if you feel like you've made that decision yourself to buy this thing, such a better feeling.
Exactly. And you're going to be happy afterwards. And I think someone who gets tricked into buying a property or pressured into buying a property, yes, you've done that sale now, but the chances that the purchaser of that property is going to call you when it's time to sell that property is quite slim, because he's just going to feel like, I heard a quote that was like, people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And if you made them feel rushed and anxious and stressed out, that's what they're going to be left with. So yeah, that's one thing. The pressure and tricks and used car salesman's tactics is something that, we always get kind of not accused of, but people will look at us side-eyed, during a purchasing process. And we've had to do a lot to try and get away from that image that, people in the industry, and it always has been a very unscrupulous industry and quite unregulated. So it's needed people to have some sort of morals and ethics to try and change that.
Yeah. And I think something that's, that we face every day dealing with buyers and sellers is you can almost take advantage of people, especially when someone says, what do you think? Do you think this is the best thing for me? And it's so easy to manipulate someone based on the emotion that they're feeling and saying, oh yes, this could be the best property for you, even
if they trust you, especially.
Exactly. And I think that's so common in our industry with agents. It's like they sense, okay, now I can do this deal. Now I can make the sale because they are opening up to me. There's a bit of emotion involved. Where for us, if they're asking that question, we give our advice, and we still make them feel like they've made the decision themselves.
Definitely. And then I think another thing that I personally, I'm sure you as well, have seen with other agents and our previous agencies, previous people we've worked with and worked for, is really just prioritizing that one deal and trying to get the most out of that one deal, whether it's trying to get the most commission or the deal that makes the most sense for you rather than the deal that makes the most sense, say, for your seller, for example. So that's also, something that people can feel, especially after the transaction, like, oh, okay, that guy didn't really have my best interests in mind. So something we try to do is just think about the other parties in the deal before ourselves, and it sounds kind of, high and mighty or whatever, but it's actually the most selfish thing you can do in the long run.
Absolutely.
By prioritizing the other people.
And we were taught in very early when we started with traditional agencies that your commission and the deal that's on the table is the most important. You need to come out with that you need to come out with as much as possible in each deal. Don't negotiate your commissions. Don't negotiate your what you're going to be potentially earning on this deal. And I feel like that's just, to me personally, that's not important, because even if you are losing a little bit on one sale, you are going to make it up from another person, from their family or sphere of or friends or
when they sell
like
it.
that. Exactly. And again, just that long-term thinking when dealing with people.
For sure. And it's been difficult for us as well. I mean, the team is growing, and fortunately we've got very, very good agents with sort of good ethics and morals. But it really puts a constraint on how fast you can grow, because you have to be so selective and try and get people who, will be disciplined in that kind of thinking. So that's been a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, it's something we've always said. We don't want to be growing fast, hiring just any agents and putting an advert on Facebook saying, listen, we're hiring, come in and let's just build the team as big and fast as possible. But yeah,
less is more.
100%. And especially we can train those agents to have the same ethics and priorities that we have with our clients. I think that's the most important part.
Definitely. Yeah. So that sort of leads to, I think actually maybe one other thing is how the agent, the industry, real estate agents in general, sort of just when it comes to marketing, don't worry so much about doing the best possible marketing you can do for this listing. Rather try and get more listings, hedge your bets, cover yourself. Just, rather than look after what you have, the focus is always on get more mandates, get more, call other agents mandates, try and get more listings. Whereas for us, again, less is more, in the sense that I would rather work with fewer clients who trust me, who, will give me that mandate knowing that I'm going to look after their interest, rather than having 100 people, 10 of which will trust me, half of them will try and negotiate our commissions down. I'd rather have, we'd rather work with people where we know, look, we can definitely sell your property. We can definitely come with value. And I think then it becomes a case of, are you willing to work with fewer people and not be scarcity minded, and rather work with people that you resonate with and people that resonate with you?
Yeah. Again, something that we saw in traditional agencies was getting mandates was your priority. And yes, that is obviously where our business comes from.
It's part of the job,
but it's not that's not our number one job in this industry, because some agencies will do prizes for mandates, and even though we do that, we're very selective in those mandates. But it's like telling the agent, go out, get the mandate, whatever you need to say to that seller, just come back with the mandate, and whoever's got the most, you're sitting up higher on this board. And it's so dangerous, because agents can easily walk away with a mandate by giving the wrong information to a client. Either telling them that they can get more for the property, or telling them that or giving promises that they know that they won't fulfill.
Telling them what they want to hear.
And that for me is the most frustrating thing, is hearing a seller or sharing a story where they've entered this mandate with this promise that is just, we know personally is not doable. And it's rather give the person honest advice, even if you walk away without that mandate. You know that you've done your duty.
Absolutely.
In terms of our philosophy, and those people will probably eventually come back to you.
And part of the philosophy is also kind of having difficult conversations, but as long as you're being honest and presenting the facts, because otherwise, the client just ends up sitting with a property on the market for 2 years. And, there's cases where, especially like vacant land, for example, you try and hold out for an extra 200K, but you've got rates and levies, building penalties, interest on the bond, like all of these costs that you have. And then 2 years later, you sell it for lower than you would have, had you gone with the original evaluation. Exactly. And I think that's such a selfish thing to do, to just say to someone, okay, cool, no worries. We can sell for, whatever unrealistic price, just for the sake of you hitting your target, so that your boss gives you a pat on the head to say, well done, you got a mandate.
Exactly.
From a seller's point of view, it's more about it's more about making all of the information known, because a lot of times, again, the priority of an average agent, and maybe the default for us that we had to try and train ourselves out of, is try and focus on getting the mandate at the right price. Whereas I think what's more important is making all of the information available to the person so that they understand, okay, cool, it's not just my net price, it's also the fact that I need to give the bank notice. I'm going to avoid some penalty costs, bond cancellation penalties. Have to keep in mind that I've got to pay for the COC, maybe some electrical work, all of these kind of things. And it's just more, taking that extra time in the beginning to sit down in person, maybe have a cup of coffee and just explain all of these other things that come with it. Because, sellers just think, okay, there's my list price, there's the commission, there's my net price, done. Yeah. But there's more that goes into it. Are we defining fixtures? Are we helping you understand, maybe they assumed that the solar inverter doesn't go with the house, and then there's a 250K fight that we have later because the buyer says, no, it's a fixture, but the seller says, no, I wasn't told. And that leads to a very, very stressful transaction.
And again, it falls down to like, don't be scared to walk away or walk away from that meeting without a listing, because if it's not the right move for the seller, based on the numbers and the figures you've given them or the facts, it's not the right time. And you can find, or you could easily put someone in a difficult position because you haven't been honest with them, or because you haven't mentioned some of these things. And people or sellers don't generally understand the industry as well as we do. We kind of assume, because we've been in it for so long, that people know this. People know you've got to pay for a COC. People know that you've got to pay your levies up front for 3 months. And it's not something that people just know off the top of their head.
Even people who have sold many properties, they, especially again, because they normally trust the agent. If they've appointed an agent, they normally just trust them to do everything. Yeah. The attorney sends an invoice, they pay it, they don't question it. And, that is a benefit of working with an agent that you trust. But, trusting an agent who doesn't have your best interests in mind, you never know where you could be losing out and where you could be, being charged for things that are not necessary, or that you could get away with.
I think a lot of people are sometimes too scared to be honest and say these things, in case they don't get the business. But at the end of the day, you're going to be sitting with a big problem.
Absolutely. Business at what cost?
Yeah.
Me and Brad have got a slightly different origin, though there's a lot of overlap. We started in, I guess, similar sort of situation, but, we've ultimately come together now to start this company, and we used to work together previously. But maybe give the story about how you started.
Yeah, I started in a traditional agency, a very small agency in the south of Joburg. It was just myself and another agent, and our goal was to get mandates, to get listings in that area. We had trainings every Monday morning as well, and that training was focused on, yes, a bit of education of the industry, but more about how to go, coming away with mandates, coming away with high commissions. And there was always something in me that felt this, it just didn't sit well with me, with my ethics, my philosophy, how I viewed doing business from the outside the industry. And I was with them for about 4 years, and eventually had an opportunity to work with you in the developer's office. I think we started there together. And the developer's office was a little bit different because you're now dealing with a product that is, or the seller part of the deal is eliminated, and you're dealing with 20 properties. People can come choose one, and you're dealing with one developer that's signing off on these deals. So it was slightly different. There wasn't the conversations with sellers on price counseling them. It was more about people walking into the office, giving them the information, and selling them whatever product was on that plate, basically.
Tell me, just to take it a step back, when you first started, what kind of properties were you working on?
So what we were taught was to, or what we were told to get our listings was to go on Gumtree, on Facebook, and find people that were trying to rent or sell their properties privately. Because they were already committed and on the market, it was our job to call them and offer our service. And I remember my very first call to someone. They still said to me, "Look, there's a reason I'm advertising privately. I want to do it privately, and every other agent is contacting me." And my very first deal, I finally got in front of that client, and it was a rental for 4,500 rand. I used to drive 25 to 30 minutes to get to that viewing every time there was someone who wanted to have a look at it. And eventually that landlord actually found someone privately, and I never got the deal, unfortunately. And so for the first 6 months was very, very difficult, because you were working on there was no guarantees. My idea to people was like, give me the chance and I'll make this happen for you. And we tried to do the deal before someone else contacted them privately. So we were almost working against each other. But as soon as I was in front of the client, we gained trust quite quickly. And that's the first deal was a rental eventually for 11,000 rand in Oakdean.
I'll ask the question for context, because a lot of people will see what we're doing now, and assuming that it kind of came easily. And this is not like we weren't working in coal mines or whatever, but doing a 4,000 rand like cottage rental in Ridgeway or southern suburbs, like you said, we would drive 25 minutes. So half of the time as well, the other client wouldn't arrive, right? The tenants who booked, they would just not show up. Their phone would be off. So you drive 25 minutes back, after a no-show. So maybe to just tie that in, my story was basically essentially straight out of matric, started working for the same developer that we eventually went back to work with together. Worked with that developer for a couple of years under Kent Gush, which was a big opportunity to see someone who was really, really doing well in the industry, who gave me an opportunity to work at the Eye of Africa Development Office. So learned a lot there about selling. Like you said, you sort of have all of the product there. People come and you essentially just trying to help them find what is the right option. So I really enjoyed that, because it was more like consulting than it was about selling. You had so many options. These were the options that people had. It was really just a matter of helping them find the right one. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed that. And then circumstances changed. I ended up joining you at the other agency, the smaller agency, and essentially then had to learn how to do rentals, had to learn how to do resales. Resales obviously a lot harder, because you've got two parties. Like you said, you've got a seller and a buyer. You have to sell yourself to the seller to get that mandate and give them a chance to let you sell. And then obviously once you've done that, you have to now find buyers and close out deals. So we did that for a few years, and then got a lot of experience, paid our dues, definitely paid our dues. And, then went back to Eye of Africa Developments. Things evolved. We ultimately ended up working in-house, and to maybe then lead us to in the next sort of conversation that we're having along this line.
I just want to say we always had short, quick conversations about starting our own company during these phases as well.
Yeah, all of the transition.
Because there was a lot of things that we disagreed with in the industry, and we always said we want to be making decisions about where we're moving by ourselves, and not having to pass it by someone, and not decisions that are against what the norm is, but more decisions that put us in a different arena.
Just try to do things that were different.
And not the traditional way that most agencies are run.
100%. So I mean, all of these, we would chat about us wanting to do our own thing, and just be, how nice would it be if we could decide on how we market and how we do this and how we dress, whatever. And then, ultimately we decided that we very much liked working with Eye of Africa developer, but we felt we could be more value to Eye of Africa if we started our own business and put our own resources, took the risk to put our own resources rather than relying on their marketing and their office and everything. And we ultimately then started our own company. We were able to then do resales, rentals on our own, as well as then fortunately still sell for the developer via our own channels. And, very grateful to them for still giving us that opportunity. We were able to sell then for Eye of Africa developers, Eye of Africa developments, I should say, as well as the other various developers in the estate, and kind of set ourselves up as a one-stop shop where, an investor can come and look at a rental apartment. We've got various options for them. We can also then set them up, find a tenant for them, manage the tenant, We've got these two wings of the business that have synergies between one another. Yeah. And ultimately, we've learned a lot and been very grateful for where we are now, and the team is growing, and some of those guys will be on camera just now. And this is sort of where we find ourselves. And what we fundamentally wanted to do different was to take deals on a case by case and not have such stringent policies on what we could and couldn't do. Make sure that we could free ourselves up to do the best thing for each client, whether it was a buyer or a seller or whatever, and maybe do things that were a little bit unusual in order to get deals done, help people out, and get our name out there.
Yeah, and just be a little bit more selective in the type of clientele that we're working on or working with and taking on. But even something that's been really great for us is the events that we do in the estate as well. Being able to make that decision to say, look, we want to host an event once a month in the estate, not having to rely on someone to say yes or no.
Exactly. And the thing is with events is you could ask, what is the specific ROI of this event? How many leads do we get? How many? And sometimes it's not, you can't justify it with numbers. It's goodwill. It's these things that you can't really price in, and it's nice to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah. Our first 3 events we did, we didn't even use any of the leads that we captured. Basically, it wasn't something that we intended to contact people or share listings with. It was just come to the event.
And people are confused, and this is another thing about the industry. It's a very, people always want to take. So people who would come to our events and then afterwards they'd come to us and be like, "Who are you guys? Why
do we need to pay something?"
Yeah, what do we have to pay for a ticket? And we'd be like, "No, we're agents in the estate. Ever anything we can do, give us a shout, and we'll be happy to help out."
Yeah.
And sometimes people do ask for a bit of advice here and there, and we're happy to give it. But for the most part, people just like to actually send us business. And where we find ourselves now is a very fortunate position because we have a lot of goodwill. And a lot of people, a lot of long-term relationships, and a lot of people that we, really genuinely enjoy working with.
Yeah, and keep coming back to us and referring friends and families, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it's the same thing as something we've always said is that we want to lead with value instead of asking for something or taking something. Let's lead with value with no expectations and take it from there. And I think people are very, very, or sometimes very shocked with that, with the way of doing it. And I think that's where things have been a little bit different for us, and something we teach our agents as well is, if you are doing a cold call, if you're trying to get a listing, if you're trying to do anything property related, find a way to give value first.
Absolutely.
And don't have any expectations.
Absolutely.
I think when we discussed training for agents, and we took on agents quite slowly. We didn't hire a lot at once. We attempted to do that on one occasion, but we learned very quickly that we'd rather be selective. But when we thought about training, and when Tend also joined us, she grasped this concept quite quickly, is that our training wasn't around how to get mandates, how to...
You're talking about currently, right?
Currently, yes. How to sell as many properties. Our training actually, me and you both were trying to get the philosophy of the company embedded in our training a lot more than actual training from our lawyers or around the OTPs or whatever it is. And yes, that training is important and it's got its place. But the reason we are here today is because of the philosophy of Stoic Realty. And this is something that we try and train and be very forgot my word. Maybe just jump on that
maybe to contrast that with what we were taught. The training was always around like, okay, if you're at a mandate appointment and the seller says, this, then this is what you say to, get a better commission, for example. And, that's
some scripts.
Yeah, scripts and all of that. And I mean, it's a very one size fits all because, sometimes sometimes people buy and sell properties for good reasons. They're scaling up, they've got married, they're having kids, whatever. But a lot of the time people are selling properties because of less than ideal circumstances. They're getting divorced, someone's passed away, whatever the case may be. And, you really have to take it on a case by case basis because sometimes, maybe their bond is close to the selling price or close to the net price or whatever. And, you're not going to get your 8% in this particular instance. And if you feel like this is a client who's, we can work with, we can help, they're going to trust us, they believe in our judgment, why would a percent commission make me not take that mandate on, right?
Yeah.
And again, when you work for a company with policies, policy is a policy. And that's, not how we think business is done over a long term. Maybe, in the short term, you'll come out with more money.
Yeah.
But in the long term, better to build trust and relationships. So just to maybe contrast that with how it used to be. As far as why we named the company Stoic Realty, that obviously is named after the Stoic philosophy, which is something that we've done our best to embody. It's not always easy, but it is a standard to which we strive. Obviously, we do fall short of that, but maybe you want to speak a little bit on what are the standout things of Stoic philosophy to you and how that relates to the business.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've touched on before, and something that's very important for me, which we've kind of got from this philosophy of Stoicism, is we find ourselves in many situations where people, or we can take advantage of people. And there's a lot of scenarios, whether it's on the sales side or the rental side, is people rely on your judgment and your advice. And these conversations happen quite often between us and other agents, is that, this guy doesn't even know that he could negotiate, he's just giving us a full price, or this guy doesn't even, he doesn't have this kind of information to make a decision. And for us is, you can really take advantage of someone, and we are very against that. Everyone should come out with a fair deal at the end of the day, and everyone should feel like they've come out with a fair deal.
And make a decision with complete information.
Absolutely. And it's so easy in this industry and other industries to persuade people into doing something that they're not entirely sure about.
Yeah. I think then maybe from my side, something that's been a good sort of North Star is, I guess, keeping one's emotions in check. As the agents in a deal means we're sort of the go-between between a lot of people. And because selling a property and moving and all of these things that go with, real estate transactions are very stressful, it's been really important to have some sort of guiding philosophy as to like how and why do you need to be the calm one, because we always say that panic is contagious, but so is calm. And when you have there's 10 different people involved in a transaction, whether it's bond originators, attorneys, buyers, sellers,
buyers' parents.
Yeah, the buyer's parents, the guy who does the COC, all of these people are important in the transaction. And, there's a lot of times where if you decided to just be a little bit more emotional about things or take something a little bit more personally than you needed to, deals start to get very complicated. And, people do make so many decisions. We like to believe we're rational, but people make so many decisions based off emotion. And, how did that guy make me feel? How did that comment make me feel? How did, this counter offer make me feel? And it's really important to manage emotions and just try and get, the seller to see the buyer side, the buyer to see the seller side, the attorney to understand all the situation, what the situation is. And if you as that in-between person now start becoming emotional and getting offended and, whatever the case may be, all of these decisions that are less than ideal that we could make, all of a sudden these deals blow up and people end up in court and property transactions get frozen and people start fighting. And, it becomes about principle. I'll never forget Johan van Heerden said that attorneys build very big houses because of other people's principles. And that always stuck with me because, just try and avoid a principle issue. Let's keep everything as logical and emotionless as we can. And, normally try, another thing is it's easy to, let the purchaser think that the seller is an unreasonable guy. And, he will then start making all of these decisions, assuming his counterpart is unreasonable. And our job is just, help each other see one another's side and make sure that, we all have goodwill in this transaction. And, if we can bring our Stoic philosophy to it just to make things a little bit easier, that for us is something that we noticed early on that was helpful, and it made a lot of sense for us to name the company after that philosophy. Another shortcoming we mentioned in the industry is that agents can be very kind of passive about how they market properties, put it up on Prop24 with some cell phone pictures and wait for the buyers to come to you. Obviously these platforms like Prop24 and Private Property and, whatever the platforms everyone knows work, they work, right? There's a reason everybody uses them. But currently it's not enough. And we found that what we have to do or what we get the best results from is if we take a marketing approach where we treat each property as if it's a specific campaign.
Yeah.
And we have then a bunch of content rollouts, videos, social media, all of the platforms, Prop24, still images, WhatsApp stories, residence groups, referrals, potential people who might have buyers, other agents, other attorneys, bond originators, like anybody who could help us find a buyer for this property. We will like hit every single avenue rather than the passive approach of just put it up and then spend my time looking for more mandates so that I can take more cell phone photos and, put more adverts up on Prop24.
But I think something we do differently as well, which we started this year, the end of last year, is on every listing we've got a like you say, a campaign that we work on. And it starts with professional photos, HD,
HDR,
4K, but whatever the best quality is, that's what we go with. It gets edited, and while we're on site, we do a video, a reel for our socials, whether it's Instagram, WhatsApp stories, Facebook, and that reel is more about highlighting the top 3, call it benefits of that specific property. That's something that that's helped us quite a lot. And then what I enjoy doing personally is a walkthrough of that property. So almost like a POV viewing, where someone can watch this video before even booking the appointment and wasting their time.
Absolutely.
And, some photos don't capture the property either, or don't capture the space in the same way that what it feels like when you're there. But a little video of the agent saying, here's the property, let me take you on a tour before you even get there is, to me, very, very beneficial and something that we do a bit differently. Because I think a lot of agencies do have a video tour of the property where it's, like a short 1-minute video of the photographer going through that property. But seeing an agent or a face taking you through that home and maybe pointing out 2 or 3 things that you wouldn't have seen in those pictures, I think makes a big difference.
Definitely.
And especially in saving the agent's time and our time with someone coming to view, getting there and saying,
I didn't know it had X,
I didn't know
Y,
that
Z.
this was a simple example is, I don't know this was an upstairs unit. And you're like, yes, maybe our photos didn't show that. So I think those things, that part of our marketing is the core, and it's really, really important.
And it saves the seller, hassles as well. I mean, yes, we're going to be there when we shoot. We're going to be there for an hour longer than we would have if we weren't doing all of that. But that means, on a Sunday morning, we're going to save you having to, change your plans and help us get access and, spend time tidying up for a client who's going to get there and say, I didn't know it was X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So, we try and just do a bit more extra work up front to save the seller hassles and all of that kind of thing. So
I think what's nice about the short reels that we do as well is sharing it with the seller themselves and showing them what their property looks like in the photographer's eyes. And I think that's also a nice thing for them to share with friends and family as well, because you never know, buyers could also come from their
absolutely
from their circle. But also it's really nice for if you're proud of your home and you're proud of what you've created or built, and being able to have like a short little video on the highlights of that home and being able to say, check this video of my property. It's a really nice thing to give to a seller as well.
Definitely. So if we were to talk more about who our ideal client is, we've already touched on that briefly, but our ideal client is someone who trusts us, someone who is going to know that we are going to do the best by them, and that they can kind of rest assured knowing that we have everything covered. Our ideal client is also someone who ideally is not, just buying one property. I think the average person probably buys a property once every 10 years. But our average client, our ideal client is someone who would buy a property sort of every second year, sometimes an investment, sometimes, scaling up, scaling down, whatever the case may be. So our best clients are people that we can do multiple transactions with and, because of that trust, every time we do one transaction, the next one gets easier because we understand, okay, cool, I understand how you operate, you understand how I operate, and the trust just grows and the relationship grows, the synergy grows. So I think to maybe highlight what our ideal client looks like, I'll just give an example. I'm not going to be super specific about it. I don't want you to know who it is. But I've got a couple of clients specifically at Eye of Africa. One of them is a developer. He buys stands, he builds houses. We then sell that house. He then takes that money, buys more stands, builds more houses, and sort of just rolls that investment over. So I have done now, we just had the last registration last week, the most recent registration last week, which was a record sale at Eye of Africa in the past 5 years, highest sale in the past 5 years. And that is the 7th transaction that we've done with this particular guy in the past 3 or 4 years. That is everything from finding the ideal stand for him to build the house on. It's then selling the house once it's built. In one case, we sold the house before it was built. So it was essentially the house was under construction. We were able to then find a buyer for the property. The buyer got a bond for the property as it was, plus then the balance of completion of the house. One bond application goes together, and the house was sold, before the roof was even on.
Which helps the seller a lot.
Which helps the seller, absolutely. So he knows that by the time he's done, he's going to get his last draw, he gets his cash out, and he can already start looking at the next investment. So like I said, that was, 7 transactions where, we're involved in, and I'm not, technically competent. I'm not a builder, architect, anything, but I kind of know what the market is after. So, we're also able to help him look at, okay, how much should you be spending on a stand so that you don't overcapitalize? What kind of stand should you build a bigger house on? Should you, you can spend a bit more money on a house on the golf course versus a house on a boundary, for example. Both can sell, but not if you, build an expensive house on the boundary, for example. So just giving guidance, that was, I think, quite a lot of value. And then obviously doing marketing that did the houses justice once they were built, selling those houses, dealing with, problems as they come up. Obviously building a house is stressful. Buying a house under construction is stressful. And, just trying to make sure that the deal is seamless so that, everyone's happy in the end, because then I maintain a good relationship for selling a good product. The developer maintains a good relationship for selling a good product and having good after sale service, and everyone's happy and everyone gets, repeat business ultimately. So that was just my, ideal kind of client. And maybe you've got something to share.
We've got quite a few of them. We always talk about an ideal client, someone that trusts our judgment and someone that sees us as a professional in this industry. Like we mentioned in the beginning of the video, is that some people still have certain ideas of this industry. But when you've got a client that trusts you and your judgment and your advice, I think it makes a big difference. It makes me think of a personal client of mine, which I've worked with for a couple of years now as well. And we were introduced to him through a developer that we were already working with. So again, you could almost see it as a referral to that client. And we assisted him in the beginning of a deal which we weren't actually involved with, but we took the initiative to get involved and assist where we can. And once that deal was wrapped up, we were able to place a tenant in that property for him on our rental side of the business. And eventually 6 months later, he bought another property from us with the same idea of renting it out. And during that process, he needed the guidance, he needed the advice to know whether this was the right purchase for him as an investment, not something for him to move into and see from a different light, but something that would suit what the tenant market in the estate is looking for. So that was nice being involved and being able to give him that advice and just being factual on those numbers, which he ultimately appreciated. And again, he handed us his other properties to manage as well, which was, for us, which...
Can I expand on? So I think one thing that's interesting there as well is that because most other agencies, again, will, have a sales agent who will sell the property and then they're done. because we are kind of a one-stop shop, you know, if you had said to him, for example, yes, you're going to buy this property for 5 million rand, you know, 100% we can rent it out for 55,000 rand, no worries, easy, you know, just sign here, buy the property. You know, and then when it's time to rent that property out, you're not the one who has to do that. You're not the one who has to find the tenant. But because you know that I'm going to sell the property, I'm also going to find the tenant and manage the property, I can't overpromise because I'm going to have to be here when the truth comes out. Absolutely. You know, and I'm going to have to do the fulfillment and make sure we find the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's setting expectations really, really early in that relationship. You know, giving him realistic numbers, giving him realistic ideas of what he can expect when either building something. And I think what I really enjoy is when clients call me and say, Brad, I need some advice. I'm looking at something. Can you assist me with the numbers on this? Can you assist me with some advice on how I should approach this? And he's one of those clients that will call you on a Saturday, will call you randomly during the day. You know, generally find out how you're doing, and then lead into even though we're not involved there, but we are still giving advice. We are still assisting where we can. And, you know, that for someone to have that person in that industry to just trust and rely on and be able to just call and say, Brad, is this a good investment? Brad, should I be doing this? What can I expect if I do this? You know, for him is probably a relationship worth having and something that we are willing to keep going.
100%. So then I've got another example, and I think you do as well. So another client, again, to sort of highlight the ideal client, is someone who I sold a vacant stand to many years back, 6 or 7 years ago. And he was building the house he bought the stand to build a house for his parents. Very sadly, while he was building, his parents passed away. And you know, because we were quite close, I sort of, you know, heard about everything that was happening, and, you know, was chatting to him throughout that time. And, you know, he ultimately said, look, I need to put this house on the market, as sad as it is. We ended up selling that house. He still has another property. He then said, okay, cool. He got through that building process and learned a lot. So now he wants to develop some more properties. So he bought a number of stands, probably within a space of 18 months. He probably bought about 8 stands, some from the developer, some resale, and some of them he built on and we sold. Some of the stands then, because of you know, sort of cash flow issues, because of some of the builds that went over budget, he needed to, you know, liquidate the stands to then put the money in to finish the other builds. You know, and I was there for sort of each and every transaction, and I'm grateful that, you know, he would never want to have another agent do any of those deals, because once again, he sort of does trust that, you know, if I say to him, look, we can sell the stand for 1.2, he's not going to say, oh, but, you know, another agent told me I can sell it for 1.3. Yeah. Because obviously they would say that because they just want to get the mandate. They don't really care about, you know, the fact that if you don't start this construction or wrap up this construction, you're going to get penalty levies. You're going to get, you know, the site is going to deteriorate. They don't really care. They'll just tell you what they want so that they can go back to the office and say, I've got a mandate. Yeah. So it's been a long journey. He has also bought some properties on auction, some of which we've rented out, some of which we've sold. And I honestly, off the top of my head, couldn't count how many transactions it's been, but I know there's still going to be a lot more in future. You know, and we've become, I would say, very good friends even during this whole process. He's like older than my dad, but I still count him as a friend, and I believe he does for me as well. So yeah, it's been great. And, you know, I only need a handful of those clients, and I have essentially a very big business. Just back on the topic of ideal clients, people that we want to work with, is it was actually quite a recent one from last year who, you know, had his eyes on the estate, was looking to also do spec build, where he'd build something, sell it, make a bit of profit, and move on from there. At first, he was very unsure about the estate, didn't know much about it, didn't know what people were doing, whether there was some success stories in the estate like that, and so it was a lot of meetings, a lot of time spent with him before he made the decision to finally buy a stand in the estate. When we're concluding that deal,
He trusted that the final price I gave him, that the developer was willing to accept, was the final price. We weren't able to negotiate more. He trusted it. He never fought me on it. And the relationship started from there. From that point, he bought another stand from us to do the same thing. So another spec build to eventually sell as a profit, or maybe keep as a investment property in the estate and rent it out. As of the last 4 months, he's already referred 3 of his friends to us as well. Someone from Mozambique, so outside of the country, someone from France, which is quite interesting. And yeah, all those guys have since been in touch with us and have been asking about stands. And immediately from that referral, people don't question anything, any information we give them on the stands or any advice that we give them. Immediately, there's a bit of trust built just from being referred. And for us, that makes our job a lot easier, and we're able to help people a lot easier in that scenario. So yeah, I don't know where it will take us, this relationship. I foresee a lot of work and a lot of deals that will come up, and he's managed to use our other relationships, like our architects and our builders. He's managed to take advantage of that. We've been able to put him in touch with good people that are busy in the estate, people that have done good work. And he's been able to lean on that and hopefully be successful in the future with it.
I'll just contrast, the ideal client, not so much contrasting it with a client that's not ideal, but more just a situation that's not ideal. So, a situation that would not be ideal would be a client who is, firstly, I think, not honest with us, because, sometimes you have people who are, maybe they're in a difficult spot. Let's assume they're in a difficult situation, and what is really not ideal is if you don't tell us the truth. For example, someone might downplay the urgency and say, I'm not in a rush, I'll sell whenever. But in the background, the sheriff is preparing to auction the property or something like that. And once it goes past that point, it becomes too late, and there's nothing we can do. Even if I have a buyer, if the auction is on, and there's a lot of money that's wasted. There's legal fees, there's all of that. So,
and you put your buyer in a really tough spot as well.
Exactly right. So just that transparency is important. Making sure that you guys are the sellers are sort of being honest with us, because it's like they say you should never lie to your lawyer, you should never lie to your doctor. I will extend it and say you should never lie to your real estate agent, just because. Like, the truth ultimately comes out, and the more I know, the more able I am to help. So I think that's one situation that's not ideal. Another situation is just, not trusting us, because ultimately you came to us for a reason. You came to us because you trust us more than anyone else. And, I can empathize because a lot of people have been around the block. A lot of people have had bad experiences. So, I really do understand that. But for us, if we feel like there isn't a mutual trust, it's not going to make the deal go well. And it means that we're going to bring, say, for example, we're going to bring a buyer to the property, and the seller hasn't disclosed to us some important information, whatever it might be. We then get left with a situation that is not going to lead to a good outcome for either party. It could mean the buyer takes the seller to court, the seller takes the buyer to court, and all of this happens just because there wasn't the right information put out there, and because there wasn't, a mutual trust, where you felt you could tell me everything. I felt I could, tell you the harsh truths, or the truths. You decide if they're harsh or not. Not trusting our evaluation, not trusting that we'll do the best for you, not trusting our clients as well, because we also, would like to say, we can be honest, where if I'm bringing a buyer to your property, I'll say to you, look, I know this guy, he's trustworthy, I've worked with him before, I've never had problems, whatever. And I'd like for you to take me at my word, kind of thing. And at the same time, if there's someone that I don't know, I'll bring them to the property and I'll say, listen, I haven't worked with this chap before. I can't vouch for him. I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but I can't vouch for him. We'll be transparent. We'll be honest with one another.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So an anecdote, and I mean, this is not even really a specific story. It's just something that we see happen time and time again. So, as an example, you've got someone who is very motivated to sell their property. They, for whatever reason, need to sell the property. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's logistical, whatever the case may be. So This chap, he needs to sell. So we say to him, okay, cool. If we need to sell the property, we have to put it on the market at this price. And then he will say, no, but this house is for sale here and my house is so much better than that house. And when we say to him, okay, cool, yes, that is true. There are other houses that are, maybe inferior to yours that are listed for a higher price. That doesn't mean those houses are going to sell, right? So you have to trust us when we say, this is the price we need to go at, because we're in the market every single day. We hear the feedback every single day and we know exactly what we need to be at. And, we're right almost all of the time. I've been wrong once or twice, I'll admit. But 99 out of 100 times, we are right with the evaluation. And basically what happens is then the house goes onto the market at the incorrect price. The situation gets worse and worse and worse. Either there's no inquiries, there's no leads, we don't do any viewings. We do viewings, but the feedback is not good. There's no offers. Situation gets worse. We end up reducing the price to our original evaluation. But by that point, the property's been sitting on the market for 6 months, which means that everybody looks at it and says, this house has been on the market for 6 months. Yes, it might be at a new price, but I'm sure there's something wrong with the property. That means either they don't inquire or they do come and look at it. And then they say, okay, cool. Because the house has been on the market for so long, I'm going to assume the seller is desperate, so I'll give you a much lower offer. Offer does or doesn't get accepted, whatever the case may be. It then ends up where it's now been a year. The house is not selling, where it's being advertised below the initial evaluation. Things then get very uncomfortable. Maybe what we've had a couple of times now is the seller gets called by an auction house. The auction house says, I see your house has been on the market for a long time. You're not having any joy. Let's auction the property. Seller agrees to it. Our advice is always to go against it. Obviously, our incentives are in line with that. So you'll take what I say with a grain of salt anyway, which is fine. But in Joburg, when there's an auction, normally people smell blood. It's not the Western Cape. Sometimes you auction a house in the Western Cape, people get FOMO, they bid higher, they pay more. That's not the case in Gauteng. In Gauteng, someone goes to an auction because they want a deal. Then, they have a reserve figure or whatever. But because the property's been on the market for so long, they get an offer that is R1 million lower than the original evaluation. But because it's there, it's an actual tangible offer. They feel compelled to take it. They get pressure from the agent or whoever saying, take it, take it, take it. The market's getting worse. Things are getting bad. Joburg's falling apart, whatever.
You've already come this far.
You've already come this far. There's the sunk cost fallacy. You also have to pay an auction fee up front. So you've already invested into it. And then lo and behold, you've sold your house for R1 million below the evaluation we gave you 12 months ago.
And something that we could have potentially sold within the first month.
Again, yeah. And if it was an honest conversation of this is the lowest that I can sell for, that lines up with our evaluation. Let's do it now. We get it sold, we get it done, and we move on. Let me ask you then, what went wrong with the deal? Like objectively, what were the problems? What were the callbacks? What were the issues?
So the first issue that came up was the seller was not truthful in the information that they gave us, specifically in terms of what they were still owing to the bank and what they would have come out after the sale. This is very important for us to understand and to know, because if we are selling a property for less than what they owe to the bank, there is going to be a lot of money that comes out of the seller's pocket that needs to cover these costs. It also causes a lot of delays. It causes a lot of unnecessary headaches through the transaction. But yeah, there was just no honesty in terms of what they were going to do, what their intentions were, and there were a couple of agreements on that sale that they needed to fulfill before the purchasers took occupation. And we, whether we should or shouldn't have, we trusted that they would do these things. We didn't put in the contract. It was just a bit of goodwill to say, yes, we will get these two things done. The deal, or the property transferred into the new owner's names. We had a good relationship with these guys. We've dealt with their father in the past, and it was the son purchasing. That's a bit specific, eh? Yeah. So the property eventually registered, and we were doing the key handover for the purchaser. Obviously, very excited to move in, with these promises of these things that will be sorted. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks go by, nothing gets done. Now, usually an agent his job's done. Agent's job, I've sold you the property, I've handed you the keys, we are out of here. Anything that you're left with is your responsibility. Obviously, that's not the way we do business, and we felt compelled to assist. And to cut long story short, we ended up having to pay money out of our own pockets to get the work done that was promised would be done. And just because it was a commitment that, even though it was passed on from the seller to us, to the buyers, it's still seen as incompetent if that's not done. And
someone has to do it.
Someone has to do it. And you cannot. I mean, you put yourself in purchaser's shoes. It's something that you should try to do as often as possible, or any client's shoes. Put yourself in their shoes, and you'll get a good idea of what their expectations are. And we couldn't walk away saying, sorry, this is your problem to deal with. We can't get involved. So we went above and beyond. We ended up getting contractors there. I ended up getting involved quite personally myself as well. We ended up paying for those costs for the work to be done. And it taught us a good lesson in terms of when working with sellers is honesty is the most important part of that deal, and being able to fulfill your promises is super, super important.
Cool. Solid.
Closing thoughts is we want Nando's. I'm so hungry.
Are you hungry, yeah?
Yes.
I already had 1,500 calories today, my boy.
If something about our story resonates with you, whether you're a seller, a buyer, or just someone looking to get into industry, please feel free to connect with us.